Hello, welcome back to Crash Labs. I'm your host, CJ Kim, and I'm solo today. I'm happy to have a guest on the show today to help me through this week, Blake Hylands, the CEO of Lithium Ionic and the president of Troilus Gold. Blake, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So you have one of the more exciting stocks going on right now, considering that the markets have been fairly depressed, especially the venture markets. A lot of chatter on CEO.ca, our boards, and actually one of the more requested stocks and guests that a lot of our visitors want. So thanks again for having us. For the benefit of our viewers and listeners, can you give us a brief background on yourself and how you got to where you are?
Sure. I'm not sure being requested that often is a positive thing or not, but no, it's good. I'm really happy to be here. I'm a geologist by background, but obviously spent the last few years heavily involved in capital markets. I've kind of worked around Canada a lot, a little bit in Europe as well, and South America previously. But most of my time more recently was spent on a project in Quebec called Troilus Gold. It was a former producing asset from PMET. We took over this project in 2018, really before that, and took it from 1 million inherited ounces to knocking on the door of 10 million, and that was a big technical success. And I think in the right market, it's going to be a great story too. And along with my business partner Justin Reed and the rest of the team there raised, I want to say, over $200 million in that story as well to do a lot of really, really good work. So yeah, it's that's a bit about me, but yeah, a little bit of technical side and a little bit on the capital market side as well.
And how did you get into lithium, from gold to lithium?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously the market there was coming around. Lithium was on my radar. I was looking for opportunities to really sink my teeth into a project, and I love big scale opportunities. Troilus was a great example. I worked on another asset called Hope Brook years ago, which is was in the news recently with a big ridge acquisition. Yeah, I mean, I think for me as a geologist, I always look at areas that have opportunities of scale. And I heard this project, know the management team or the founding team around this asset. I've known them for a long time, all of them. Heard the project, saw the pitch, saw who was working on it, and looked at the scale opportunity. Of course, the relationship distance-wise, geologically to what Sigma was doing at the time was really interesting as well. It had a producing asset just north of it in CBL, a private producer, so kind of proof of concept all around it. And it just had this huge kind of geological upside that I couldn't really resist. And so, started chatting with the team, and I think they were looking for somebody to step in and run it. And yeah, it seemed like the right thing at the right time. Cool.
And what made you get into geology? Like you're fairly young. We're talking beforehand, and I don't think you've seen a full bull market. So you think?
No, I wish.
Yeah. So what made you get into this space?
Failing out of everything else, basically. No, I was. I went to Western for school. I started in business, and didn't do well. I played hockey, and it didn't go well. So they kicked me out of that program. And I had to go undeclared, and so in being undeclared, ended up taking a geology course or two, and kind of recognizing that it is like taking a business class in a way. I mean, it's an industry in itself. It's very specific, and really started to enjoy that aspect of it, seeing how you could relate what you were learning at university into a true skill that you could actually do outside of school, which is I think rare in university sometimes. And just stuck with it, did that, and two major declarations later, I was a geology major, and then graduated in it, and started working right in the field. I mean, went straight into a tent from school, and yeah, that's it.
So first job out of the gates with who?
I was with a company called Castilian, then became Coastal Gold. It was that was the one I was talking about, Hope Brook. It's in Big Ridge now, the company Big Ridge, and it's Newfoundland based.
Yeah.
And it was my first gig. They dropped me off in a helicopter in the middle of nowhere, and we were all living in a single tent, and we had a core shack that we all kind of built up and lived in, and started drilling the first holes there. And again, it was it kind of even going into Troilus later, it kind of dovetailed well because it was a former producing asset as well. BP had operated it, and then Royal Oak. So, it was kind of taking this brownfields project and trying to give it new life. And I think we did a really, really good job of that in defining, well over 1 million ounces there as well. And making some key new discoveries on that project. So I think that's still a good project. And then, going and, taking that to Troilus, being brownfields was easy to kind of transition into that, learning how to go back and sift through old data and try to put your best foot forward and find new things. Because that's ultimately, it's nice to have a brownfields project, but it's always tough because people have their preconceived notions of what a project is when you go into it. They think they know it already, and you have to kind of change the narrative there. So but yeah, Hope Brook, Newfoundland, that was pretty much home for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. And how did you make the transition from geologist to, I guess, the capital markets to now someone who is, running their own issuer? I think of, there's and do you think it's beneficial to have the technical background to make the move into running your own shop, or is it like,
I do?
Yeah.
I mean, I find it very helpful. I think people, anybody can be good at it from any background, really. Yeah. I find it very helpful, just to be able to translate the story when I'm marketing or, out here doing this type of thing. I mean, I find it easier to be able to walk on the site, know what I'm looking at, be able to kind of speak the language, so to speak, not Portuguese, but the geology language. And I think from that perspective, be able to look at assets that I want to be involved in as well, because, I can put some weight into whether I really like it or not.
Yeah. So like us running an investment issuer, we obviously talk to a lot of companies, and a lot of the times we'll talk to a CEO who's also a geologist, and it's like watching paint dry sometimes, right? And then I think, like, how do you teach a geologist how to become a good promoter? Because it's not all technical talk, right? You have to be able to build a very compelling story that even someone with just a retail background can understand and get excited about.
Yeah.
Right? So
I guess I don't know. I mean,
you raised so much money, so obviously you must be doing something right.
I think what I would say, I've worked with some really good people who've done a good job of that over the years. I have come from technical backgrounds and do it. I would say that one thing to always do is, or I try to always do, is recognize the audience who you're talking to, and even though you can take something that's complicated and detailed, but talk about it on a level that everybody can get involved in and have a chat about, right? You don't have to dive into a level that everybody's eyes glaze over, because I think that's really what's happening there, right? Is it's not that the content is not interesting. It's just maybe the audience doesn't find what you're talking about interesting. So I think maybe, I don't know fully the answer, but maybe the answer is, understand your audience, who you're talking to, and why they would care about what you're talking about. Because a lot of it, I could turn it around on a lot of topics and my eyes would glaze over the same way, right? So I don't know. I mean, that would be I don't know if it's advice or what I just gave there, but that's how I approach it, right?
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
So like if there is a younger geologist thinking that, one day I am going to run my own company, what advice would you give him or her?
I would say really build a strong base technically, not just on, understanding mineralogy and thin sections, but really understand your business, what you're doing, why you're doing it. Try to work backwards, right? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? You're trying to build a mine. You're trying to make money, ultimately, right, as a company. And then work backwards and how you can technically kind of apply yourself to that. But build a really strong base technically, if you can, probably even stronger than I am. And then, round yourself out with more than just that singular technical ability, right? And work with people from all different walks of life, get to know different people that do all different things. And then when opportunity arises, and I say this a lot, I mean, take it, take opportunities when they're in front of you. It may not always be the thing that pays you the most. It may not be the thing that seems the most lucrative, but, when the opportunity's there, take it, always, and learn as much as you can, and that would be, I mean, the only advice. And then the rest of it, I don't know the answer.
Fake it till you make it. Everything else. Right?
Yeah, just be exposed to as much as you possibly can all the time. If you get invited to something, go. If you are offered the opportunity to be in a conversation you wouldn't normally be, make sure you sit in the room and just learn. So
in the room, in the deal too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So how did you get involved with Pat DeCapo? I see you used Shell number 6. And how did you get involved with Power One and that crew? Because they have an incredible track record of putting together deals and raising money. So who did you have the relationship with him? Or
it wasn't mine. And that portion of the transaction was done by the time I joined the team, right? I came on sort of right as the company was going public. But what I would say is, I've had a really good opportunity to be exposed to the Power One team and spend time with them. And it is really, impressive. I was in their office for a presentation last week, and just seeing how much money's been raised through there and how supportive they can be of deals. And it's really, it's been a pleasure to kind of get to know Pat a little bit and David and the team over there a lot. It's been great.
I was going through quickly the list of all their CPCs, and starting from number 1, like the track record's crazy. Eh? Like number 1 was Mason Graphite, which still went over 100 mil when graphite was had its run.
Yep.
Bedrocan was the second. I think the third was a pharma deal that still went over a couple of $100 million. Lithium, which was acquired.
It's a big one.
Yeah. Collective Mining.
Yeah.
And you were number 6, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they have a really good track record of getting behind a name and sticking behind a name. I think that was one of the things that was attractive about, that group and that Shell was, there were probably opportunities to do it different ways, but this was a really supportive group.
Yeah,
that was going to stick with you and be a part of the name, and with really good exposure for us. So yeah, it's like I said. I mean, it's been really a pleasure to get to know them, and it is amazing the track record they're building there.
Yeah, they have they're gonna have the institutional support just because of the track record and stuff. But what about on the retail promotional side? Like, do they bring that to the table, or is that more to the issuer to do that on their own?
It's a good question, probably to some extent, but I don't. It's a good question. I don't necessarily know if you say this name's in there. I think it does have cachet, through certain circles for sure, and probably more and more all the time. Yeah, I mean it's a great group to have behind your name for sure, for a lot of reasons, a lot of great connections, and probably has some of that cachet you're talking about. Yeah.
I think your story has a good mix of both institutional and retail, because I was talking to. I forget who it was, but it's having too much retail in your story is a double-edged sword. Like it's very, very good. Obviously, when you want to get the hype train running and it's swinging upwards, but then any huge swing upwards, you're going to have the institutions cashing out because they're a little bit more not prudent, but they know when something's going to be overbought and they'd rather take some chips off the table. And then once it's swinging downwards, you have that herd mentality fervor that only the retail side can bring to the table. And all of a sudden you're going to have an exaggerated shift downwards. So when you have a good mix of it, you're not going to have the huge swings left and right, and a little bit more, I guess. If it's going to go upwards in the trajectory you want it, it'll have a nice oscillation that way, right?
Yeah, I think they both do really important things in your stock and in your name, and it's important to have a strong blend of both, right? I mean, stocks can trade all the time, but aren't necessarily always really trading, if that makes sense. I mean, blocks move around, and institutions trade to institutions, and you kind of see stocks kind of kick around the same levels, and nothing's really happening. And that's really, I think, often, and it's all situational, but I think in sometimes that's the case of that. Sometimes nobody's really watching your story. I mean, the retail component is people are watching your story and like what they're hearing and want to get involved in your story. And that, I think, is what creates that level of urgency sometimes in the name, right?
Yeah.
But you can't always just have that sort of emotion in a story either. You need sometimes not that all institutions is emotional, but you need some of that fire and emotion in the story that retail brings. That you need kind of the other side as well, and the institutional side that sort of trades fundamentally on your name and can also help you set floors and move stock around and eat up stock and that kind of thing. So I think it is something that we've done well, having a good blend, and we have to keep doing that though.
How did you get to your retail base in there? Like, why is your story so followed?
Yeah, I mean, like some of the founders of this company had a strong retail following when they started the company. I think there was a strong input from the retail side as we got started.
Yeah.
And since then, I mean, it's the hardest thing to tap into, if I'm being honest. I mean, I do a lot of the retail roadshows and things like that, and lunch dinners, and you never know how impactful it truly is, you know, if people are really buying into the name. But I think in this market, with this commodity, it actually does get some traction. And so, you know, through the U.S. and Canada, do though as many of those kind of retail reach programs as you can. Yeah. Do things like this. Do things that people want to listen to, that get them excited about the name, put it on their radar, and try to be newsy. Get the name out there.
I think it just shows you how important social media is now, and how much power. Like, you make the rounds, you talk to someone, and you don't know how impactful that one conversation is, but maybe they have 10,000 people following them under some weird alias on Twitter, I don't know, Lithium Rhino, and then, but then he has someone following him that has another 10,000, and it's contagion at a certain point, right?
Yeah, it's something that I think that our whole industry is having to adapt to, and there's a few names that do it, like a few people that do it well, but I think in any industry, it's really hard to do well. You feel like you're doing it well, you're committing capital and time to it, and sometimes you're just spinning your tires in the sand and getting nowhere. But you're right. I mean, there are groups that have strong following, and they get behind something, and that following gets behind it, and who follows them gets behind it.
Is newsletter writers done then? Like, are there any good ones out there?
No, I don't know if it's done. I just think it's probably the way that those newsletters get out there, the platform. I think that the newsletter is a good foundation for maybe that social media outreach as well. I think it's a great thing to promote. It tends to come from somebody who has a strong background in the space. They tend to have a good, rational way of looking at it. I don't know if it hits the newswire the same way and gets the traction it did before, but I think it is a good foundation for maybe that social media outreach. So yeah, there are a few names that do good work. Yeah, there are, I think.
Do you think, you like lithium was caught the eye of the generalist space because I would say social media, and you have a lot of big talking heads talking about lithium. Elon Musk obviously is one, but like there's this huge green transition that a lot of that everyone's getting excited about and kind of touting the commodities, but not necessarily mining. But lithium, it feels like, has kind of died down, like especially from its peak. It's more than halved now.
Yeah.
Like, is the fervor done? Like, are issuers still going to get a bid now, or are we gonna see the shakeout where all the followers just die off, like these guys, diamond companies pivoting to lithium in the middle of nowhere, and they're picking jurisdictions where.
I mean, it's a really good question. I think that I would describe the space as still extremely hot. I mean, even at half of where it was, it's way above historic, and it's still really, really strong. And I think the market for it is really strong. And I think we've seen it kind of hang here at these levels, at these prices for quite a while now. Almost feels like it's stabilizing a little bit at these levels, which is kind of, I think, maybe even better for the space. Maybe it doesn't create the same, again, those emotional reactions to $8,000, $9,000 ton spodumene, but brings in steady investors. It makes people that maybe felt like they missed it, or it wasn't real, or it was going to be the next fad. It brings in this whole new wave of investors that now kind of see a business forming out of it. New companies get created whether they're good or bad, it's situational. There are a bunch of bad ones, a bunch of good ones, but more money gets sucked out of the space too.
Yeah.
But I do think that the names like lithium and some of these other strategic materials are going to do well. And I think that there's an investment base. Like you're a younger guy, I'm a younger guy. We were talking about that. Our groups are too. I think there's an element of understanding where these materials are going to go, kind of recognizing the value of what's coming out of the ground, and not sort of the abstract hedging idea of things like gold and precious metals. I think there's a real shift maybe in some ways in some of the investor space to a different type of investor who loves seeing, okay, this is coming out, and particularly in a case like hard rock, it's simple, small scale, relatively low impact mining that produces something that we can use to move to a net zero emission initiative that's going on, right? That's something that's tangible. The full supply chain is right out in front of them. It's a business they can understand, invest in. They can pick their horses and kind of go with it. So I think that in some ways lithium's been good that way, is that it's really understandable to the masses. I think.
And for the benefit of, I guess, myself, I don't have that technical background, but a lot of people listening in, what are the different kind of lithium deposits? And, I know I would say the first lithium run, it was all about brine, but now it's all about hard rock. And so why is that? Like, is it just because all of the brine projects are gone now and people had to pivot to something else?
No, I think there's a couple reasons. I mean, demand and price is hugely important to why other alternative methods come online. But I think brine certainly dominated the market forever and is going to be a huge part of the market. It's a completely different type of formation, basically a saltwater deposit, historic saltwater deposit that ultimately creates a ground layer that you remove through drilling and then processing through an evaporation process. So a lot of times, on television or in the media, you see kind of evaporation pools. They look like these yellow pools and that kind of thing, and they use a relatively large land area to evaporate that material. Chemicals are added, that kind of thing, to ultimately liberate the lithium out of brines. And I think brines are still going to always represent a big portion of the industry. But more recently, hard rock is focused on the mineral spodumene. Spodumene can be liberated usually through gravity process, which is very simple. It doesn't necessarily require chemical processing, so it's water and grinding basically on pretty small scale. And you get this coarse grain mineral, not unlike any other type of mining, whether it be hard rock mining for copper, gold, nickel, silver, whatever it's going to be. So it's simplified. It has a couple of advantages in that it can ramp up very quickly. Process time, evaporation pools can take a long time to produce lithium, whereas hard rock can produce it quicker. Mm-hmm. And hard rock also has the advantage of being able to go directly to the material hydroxide, which is being used in some of the long range batteries, whereas carbonate has been the standard for the lithium space for a long time, being used in some batteries, but also in ceramics, grease, that kind of thing for a very long time as well. So it has the advantage of speed on a couple fronts, both in processing and both in exploration as well, and how quickly these projects can come online, be defined, be extracted, be produced, and be brought to market. So I think brines will be a big part. More of them are being found, and they will be a big part of the lithium space. But hard rock has the advantage of speed and high quality for low cost, basically.
What about these deposits, like these clay deposits?
Yeah, and they're around too, and they just...
Yeah, but that's more of a science experiment, isn't it?
Well, I think at this stage, what I tell everybody for the demand that's actually out there to reach net zero emissions and what we need to come online, we actually need all of these projects to work. They need to come online, whether it's the in situ processing like the DLE stuff, or more brines, clays, and more hard rock deposits, to try to keep up with the demand on a global scale for where we're trying to move. We need them all to come online. It might actually be a failure of this space, might actually be undersupply as opposed to oversupply. So we kind of need to see them come online.
Like, what about the stuff in Alberta? What is all that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's it varies, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, deposit. There's some clay stuff. There's some hard rock stuff. Yeah, and some, I think, some brine in there as well. But yeah, I mean, typically in Canada, it's been the Quebecs and Ontarios of the world that have focused on their hard rock for sure. But I mean, at this point, I think what we're excited about in the hard rock space is that there's been one producer of hard rock lithium, which is Western Australia, historically forever, right? And now with Sigma coming online, CBL already being online, ourselves growing, Latin Resources growing, Atlas to the south, there's a new belt coming online that can actually supply hard rock lithium to the market on a similar scale to Greenbushes and Pilgangoora, which is huge, right? I mean, they're 3 million or 3.5 and 2.5 or something like that combined of LC, kind of production per annum. We could be in a belt of a very similar scale with extremely high grade material.
Well, like for such an important sector, why are we seeing so many like I've seen a lot of short reports, and it's very hard to take on mining because, I don't think they understand. People who are not in the sector will not understand the promotional aspect of it, I guess. But I've seen a lot more short reports in like someone attacking Sigma and Piedmont and like even Patriot got one.
Yeah.
Right. So why do you think we're seeing a lot more of these institutions coming after?
I think it's
companies.
The entire market is pretty tight, right? I mean, not a lot's moving. I'm not sure there's a ton of value in shorting a lot of gold names right now. I mean, what would you gain from doing that?
It's done.
I think that's like
they're already dead.
Yeah. But they'll have their time as well. So I think what's ended up happening is you've got a singular sector within the mining group that's basically performing pretty well. So and seeing big runs and big upticks. And unfortunately, I think with these short reports, obviously that their focus is hurting a company to ultimately gain from themselves, and so I don't tend to give them a lot of credence and a lot of time, just because I mean a lot of it tends to be, of course, intentionally attacking a name that doesn't necessarily need that. Look, our industry has had a history of sometimes being over promotional, but I don't know what industry hasn't. Like everybody owns the best truck, right? Like they've all been told it's the number one truck in America. Like how can they all be the number one truck in America? But we're bad. We've had that sort of track record of promotion. So I think there's an inherent skepticism already built into the market a little bit about it, like something that moves quickly and can be abstract like mining. Yeah. And then somebody slides in with a short report and kind of says everything people are concerned about, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in the end, and they end up filling their short. So I think why in this space more than any others is probably just that these are the names that are currently performing in this market, and it's very hard to make money in this market. So the short position might be the way to do it for some groups.
Yeah. And it looks like Sigma is in talks with several groups, and that obviously is going to directly benefit you, because I would say that that's an obvious comp, similar grades, and you're in the same jurisdiction. Is it? But you guys aren't you're pretty not far away, but can you use the same infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, we are. You can see their operation from Bandera. It's very, very close. Yeah, we would be utilizing a lot of the same infrastructure that's already there. Yeah. I mean, the infrastructure in this area is fantastic. It's going to need to continue to develop with the growth of the belt, because to get the scale I was talking about, the Pilgangoora scale or the Greenbushes scale, roads need to be upgraded, ports need to be upgraded, all that kind of stuff. Hydro lines need to also come with it. But what's existing there now is fantastic. Hydroelectric power, paved roads, a community of 40,000 people, road access to Bello, road access to port. It's really all you could ask for as far as existing infrastructure, and then they have they've built a mine, they're starting their operation process, and they showed that can be done at a reasonable price and very quickly. So we benefit a lot, and through the sale process. And I don't think it's a secret that there's something going on there, and we'll see how that looks. But yeah, I think it draws a lot of eyes to the belt. It would be much harder to tell the story without a big project like that next door.
What do you have to do to close the value gap? Because they're a lot further along. Is it just continue, like you just raised a bunch of money, is just taking that, put that into the ground and keep on proving out the resource?
Yeah, I mean they've done a really good job. I mean they're on their way. They've constructed a plant that it can do over 250,000 tons of concentrate production, which is exactly what we're trying to get to. They have a phased approach that goes, I think, to 5 and then close to 800,000 tons, and we have the same idea. We need to come in behind and continue to find resources to scale that opportunity. Yeah. One of the reasons we put out a resource now of roughly 20 million tons was. That's a similar scale to their Shusha project. We can start, putting economics around a very similar kind of phase 1 to theirs, which, these are unbelievable economics in this current market. And really now it's just, it is exactly that. It's just playing catch up. It's making new discoveries, drilling off what we already know, showing that we have resource scale. We'll put a resource update out later this year again. And I expect us to be more than double, but, we'll see where we're at. And when you have that, now you can start showing a pathway to 400 or 500,000 tons of production. And again, we'll see where we're at. Yeah. But those are world-class deposits. And I think that helps us start to close the gap. Permits, engineering, starting the process of getting these things done. I mean, one of the advantages of where we are is the speed that we can actually get up and running. Minas Gerais was, I think, a top-tier jurisdiction for moving projects forward. We saw Sigma do it in 18 months, and that was during COVID for their first permit. And I think it'll be even quicker on their Barrero and NDC showing. So we expect the same kind of timelines, even less than the 18 months. And that helps us kind of differentiate ourselves from our peer groups because it just takes so long in a lot of these jurisdictions to move projects into production. And so I think as we get the permits back, as we put out engineering, as we show the resource growing, we'll quickly start to gap up towards where they are. At least that's the hope. But like I said, they've done a great job.
What kind of people are coming to site right now? Are they oil company? Are they car companies? Are they institute? Like who comes? What's the mix when you have like a site visit?
Yeah, I think it's everybody. There's a lot of through traffic for a few reasons, right? I mean, we have obviously Sigma right next door. Yeah. Everybody comes through the same town, the same hotels, the same group, and they tend to tag on, come to see Ladin, ourselves, Sigma. They'll tend to do it all in one run. But yeah, it's a bit of all of the above. It could be car companies. It could be mining companies. It could be large scale, high net worth investors, that type of thing. It's a busy area. I mean, they've actually expanded the hotel and 3 times since I started on it. It's only been a year and a half. So
that many people coming through.
It's extremely busy. Yeah. And I think it's been really good for Swai, and I think for Salinas, and it's really good to have that kind of attention. So yeah.
So who do you think acquires Sigma?
I wish I had an idea. I mean, there are so many rumors about who it could be.
What's the big rumor?
Well, I mean, there's rumors of Tesla, and there's and other car manufacturers. There's rumors that it could be the Chinese. There's so many rumors, right?
Has Elon been to site down there?
Not that I'm aware of. No, no, but I wouldn't tell you if you had.
Really?
No, I'm just kidding. No, I don't know. I mean,
I'll just track the private jet.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think he's gotten rid of that yet, has he?
You can stop watching where Taylor Swift goes for 1 minute. Look at Elon Musk. No, I think Tesla would be. I would be shocked. I mean, I'd be very surprised. It hasn't been in their business model to buy mines and do it that way. I think there are a lot of suitors that would make sense for them, but I wish I had better insight.
I bet it's going to be a Chinese buyer. Are they all over it down there?
Well, yeah, I think so. But I mean, there are hurdles to jump through, right? It's a Canadian domiciled company as well, right?
But I thought it has to be like a project within Canada, or the investment.
No,
thing can still.
Yeah,
really?
I mean, it can, and I think that's one of the things that if it's going to be that direction, I think it could, and I think you're absolutely right. That could be exactly who makes it fit. Yeah. There's some hurdles to jump through to make sure that can be done, right? So I'll be interested to see if that's the case. But those are some of the strongest rumors I've heard would be through the Chinese.
Is Sigma considered domiciled in Canada then?
Yeah, they have a domicile there, and I think they have one in the U.S. as well, right?
Okay, so they're
they're dual, but they have links to Canada. Yeah.
And then you saw PMET got like a strategic investment.
I think it was LG, right? That came in with the
No. It was Albemarle that took 5% of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Invested in them today, right after their resource.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think of James Bay?
I mean, I'm a big fan of Northern Quebec for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry, on PMET, I was thinking of Piedmont. But yeah, on PMET, that was a fantastic resource that came out yesterday. I mean, it was huge.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of nailed what they were targeting too, which is always nice. I think that's important. I think that it's a really interesting project. I like to go and watch their presentations as much as possible whenever I hear they're at PDAC or wherever they're going to be. I like hearing what they're going to do next. It's not always easy to move projects forward up there. I know very well. I'm not speaking out of school here. I know very well how it goes moving projects there, and they're going to have all the same aspects that any other project's going to go through. And like I said, I'm a big fan of Northern Quebec and the James Bay region. I think that one's a winner. It's just one of our key elements is to try to obviously bring our project to production before projects like that do, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the key elements that I think we're going to be able to set ourselves apart on projects like that are going to be huge. I think we're going to be huge too, but that it helps us that we can get going quicker.
Is that so you're pretty confident that you're going to be able to go through the hoops and hurdles faster than?
Yeah, I'm going to knock on wood on that one, but I think there's a proven track record here, a proven process that that permit timelines are just quicker.
Yeah.
I think we're in the right area of Brazil. We don't have any major deforestation issues. We're not looking at major First Nations issues. We have a community that's generally supportive, and we have to do the right things to make sure we're continuing to work with that community. But overall, I think we're in the right space to not hit the same kind of hurdles that other groups will.
Does Sigma have any troubles with their environmental? Because wasn't that one of the issues that all of the shorters were bringing up, or like the naysayers?
I mean, I don't know if them having any issues with environmental. I think that they're a mine starting up in an area that hasn't necessarily had a mine of that scale before. So there's going to be an element of just getting used to having that kind of scale of operation in that area. But I'm not aware of any major environmental issues from them. They're just going through normal growth right now, I think.
Because there are some mines, not in that particular area, but like some mines having trouble on the environmental front, like not being able to move forward. It's not lithium. I think it was gold, right?
I mean, there's always projects that run into, different hurdles and all these kind of things. When I look at like Sigma and our opportunity, one thing I actually like about these projects is that the footprints are small. What we're talking about are projects that have really pretty spectacular economics, and at the same time, they're not huge, right? You're not actually moving as much rock as like a big iron ore project or the Malartics of the world or this kind of stuff. The footprint is actually much smaller than that. And because of that, you especially in our area as well, you can do, a DMS process. You don't have a big flotation plant. It's low cost of capital to build it. You have less trucks moving around. You have to move less rock. It's just I think when you see them, and the first time I saw Sigma's plant, I couldn't believe it. I thought like, okay, that's the starter plant, or where's the rest of it? And it's just it's the advantage of these projects is that they make great money. They're not expensive to build, but the reason they're not expensive to build is because they're not huge. The footprint they create is not huge, and then they end up producing what we need to go to a zero emission initiative, right? Yeah. Whether you believe in that or not, that's what the market is, right? So I look at Sigma as very much in the way that Anna kind of talks about it as sort of a green initiative project, and on a mining scale, it's pretty good.
So, are there any regions like for a lithium investor that they should stay away from? Because I'm seeing a lot of, like as I said before, when there's a hot commodity, a lot of operators come out of the woodworks and try catch a hot market to make a little bit of money. And then we're seeing everything come up now.
Yeah, I think a lot of them have validity and they need more work. I think earlier you were saying it's a science experiment or things like that. Some of these projects are just, they need a lot more to fall in place. A simple hard rock project is very simple, right? You mine rock, crush it, and send it off as concentrate. It's very simple. Some of the new science, there's going to be winners and losers in those spaces. I'm always interested to see how they're moving along, and I'm eager to see them be successful to some degree. Not too successful. I don't want them to take away from what we're doing, but I think ultimately some of them are going to be losers. I would say if you're going to jump into something that's new and new science, really do the research and really look at who's running it and what their background is and all that kind of stuff, because some of it's not going to work. Yeah.
Do you want, like, if someone came by and offered to buy you guys out right now, would you do it?
I don't think at these levels we're even trying to contemplate that right now. Right now, I think we view ourselves as highly undervalued. And
but doesn't every company think they're undervalued?
Yeah, but most of them aren't. But in this case, I think we really are. And again, you can point to projects all around us. I mean, Latin is just north of us. We have the extensions of Latin. They were, I think there's 600 and something, but they were $800 million a week ago. And we're one resource update away from being exactly where they are. We've got a project right next door that's probably 2 years ahead of us in development, and they're $5 billion company, right? So at 300 million, I think I can fairly say that we're undervalued, and so we're not walking around with a for sale sign. That's for sure.
So you did mention it before, but like, what are the big catalysts on the horizon for you guys? You have an updated resource later this year, but it's just taking the money that you raised and just drilling it out. And
it's a big reason we raised that money. I think that the raise was important in that we've been really aggressive. The team's done a really good job of making new discoveries. We added an area to the north, that Neolith acquisition, that is really the extensions of where Kalina is from Latin Resources. And now we're running 13 drills and finding more and trying to define more. So we're drilling to bring things to a level that we could feed into feasibility studies. And we're also making new discoveries and also trying to do boots on the ground to grow more resource in behind it. So, those things it's expensive, right? And I don't think that anybody wants to take the foot off the pedal because it's coming together so well. If it was just simply drilling off one area, we wouldn't necessarily need as much capital, or certainly wouldn't need capital soon. For us, we're very close to, we'll do a PEA update, likely in Q3. It'll come with, I think it'll be with a resource update as part of it. I'm expecting a substantial increase in what we just put out a few weeks ago. Ultimately, that was already out of date probably by the time we put it out, just because of how quickly these things can be defined. And then we'll be submitting for permits. And we expect kind of 6 to 8 month turnaround times on those. We'll have a smaller scale one that's going out in probably September, and then the bigger scale 250,000 ton kind of production scenario going out in January. We have a little bit more baseline study work to do.
Yeah.
So we expect, those are big catalysts in my opinion. I mean, and then ultimately a feasibility study that we're aiming for in later this year, start next year. And those things help kind of wrap economics around the project as well, and kind of help guide the market on what's kind of opportunity they're looking at with a project like this. And then we'll see. I mean, we're having conversations with those groups that are coming and visiting the area, and we'll see what that looks like. The right partners. We've been open and talked about it a lot. The right partner that creates value for our shareholders. We'll listen to that too, which could be a big meaningful move for the stock as well.
So I guess it's like I'm not saying boring in a bad way.
What's boring in a good way?
Yeah.
Well,
you're just gonna go through the motions, and
it's
like there's not gonna. You know what? Like, I'm not saying it in a bad way.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I know what you're saying.
You know exactly what you guys have to do and go through the motions, right?
I think that there's an element of no matter what, once you get into a size like 20 million tons, and now you're adding to that, I think sometimes people look at it as ho-hum. Like, of course they're going to add to that. I think we will have some splashy stuff this year. I think we're going to try to be as exciting as possible. And I think that we'll have new discoveries as well.
Yeah.
I think that's going to happen. I think that's splashy. I think
Yeah,
it's
no,
interesting.
that would be fun.
And you know, I kind of it gets boring, but you know, sometimes execution just is. You almost want it to be in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Well, that's why I said in a good
I
way,
agree
right?
with you in that
Because
way.
if you go through the motions, ideally you're going to close the value gap between, your peers down there.
Yeah.
Like the grades are comparable. Like
Yeah.
like you're operating in the same area in terms of infrastructure, and people are looking under the hood.
Yeah.
So
for sure. No, it's
yeah.
I wouldn't put it on a dating profile, but
Yeah.
as boring. But I think it's
you'd be on a Christian dating
steady.
site.
Yeah, that's it. That would be the perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I think you were very diplomatic in a lot of your answers, which is not a bad thing as well. I think we got through everything that I wanted to get through. Did you want to any closing remarks from you?
No, it's funny. I try not to come off too diplomatic. I like, I want to be opinionated, but it's funny. I think in our space, I like a lot of these projects, and I like a lot of the people, and I think we're at the stage in this industry where everybody's trying to poke holes in it. What's wrong with it? What's wrong with it? When's it going to fall apart? And I think that a lot of these projects that are moving forward are excellent. There's a host of terrible ones too. I think when we have
you on in 5 years, if you sell it, I'm going to bring you back on, and then you're going to be like, this guy is an asshole. I spoke to this guy. You didn't give me any time. Right?
No, it's look. I mean, we're got an industry full of great people and an industry full of assholes too, and there's going to be lots of that. But overall, I'm most companies. I'm a big cheerleader for most of them. So it comes off diplomatic. But
well, any big wins is good. Like for our sector, especially now, any wins is good for everyone, right? You need, like, if there's a huge score, you're going to just bring more eyeballs to the generalists. And
and it's
like when Sigma gets acquired, everyone wants to see who else is in the mix, right?
But I think it's typical. A lot in our industry, it's like, tell me how bad somebody else is, and I'm always kind of like, well, I don't know, what are they saying about me too? But I think in this space, like a Sigma sale is a win for us for sure. But also what they're doing now is a huge win for us too. If they just kept operating and making hand over fist money, that's fantastic too, right? So, I don't want them to fail. I have no interest in that. Again, I'm a big cheerleader of theirs. Yeah. All
right. Well, thanks for your time, and if anyone else has any questions for you, we'll put your contact on when we release it. And
fantastic.
I think it was really informative, and thanks for coming on and helping me get through the week without my colleague Denny. So hopefully people like this one, because I think I have to do another one.
It's the middle of summer. I can't believe you're even here. It's great.
I know. I'm a low man on the totem pole.
All right. Clearly.
Okay.
Thanks so much. Pleasure.
All right.